Hello and welcome to After the Table, a TTRPG podcast. Tis I, your favorite drag queen turned person that performs online and plays pretend, Shelly Von Miller. And today's episode is featuring somebody that I'm actually a big fan of because they're an awesome GM, an awesome performer, and just has a really great community whenever it comes to online presence. And super talented. You might have seen them on a wonderful AP with hundreds of other people called Castleton. And a great producer in the space, in the AP space. Welcome, the Playmat, aka Matt.
What?
Hi, Matt. How's it going?
Good. You're too kind.
You put up with my bullshit and let me donate to you and be like, hey, or tip you and be like, hey, can I run some things by you?
What do you mean put up with your bullshit? Supporting my content and business. You're reverse. Right? You're not gonna win the niceness Olympics with a Canadian, okay?
You know what? I'm gonna try. It's
yeah.
it's the Southern United States in me that's
fair.
just like,
Yeah.
you're just so kind. I adore you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm also French Canadian, so then I know the English part is the niceness part, and then the French Canadian part just cuts through, right?
Waka.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I love doing these types of things, With ADHD comes the love of hyperfixating and talking about the thing you adore to do, right?
And that's the whole point of this podcast. The whole point. It's like, yes, undiagnosed ADHD. I love talking about TTRPGs and APs. Please, people, please come talk with me about this. Please talk about your project. I love hearing about it. Speaking of TTRPGs, how did you become, involved in the space? How did you become a fan of TTRPGs?
Okay, two big questions, two very different questions. Involved in the space or a fan of TTRPGs?
Yes.
Going with first. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So
do what you with.
Yeah, a fan of TTRPGs came way before, right? I'm gonna bring it back to when I was a child, and my favorite thing to do, either on the playground with friends or at home with my toys, was to play imaginary games, is what I called it, right? You have your Goku action figure and your, Transformers, and they're in a game together. They're different characters. You're making stories and stuff. I was always a kid caught in my head and making up stories, and always, part of, I think, my ADHD when I was a kid, when I was bored at school, was to just go off into fantasy land and, I loved the cartoons that I watched and everything, and it was my favorite thing to do. And so I think that is what really got me into it. I played a little bit of D&D. I think it was 3rd edition at the time when I was a kid. But in terms of played 3rd edition, we had the books, we liked the art, and we didn't read it, and we played by the rules that we wanted and just made everything up. But then about, I'd say, maybe 2011, when 4th edition was the thing, I started playing that with some friends and roommates and stuff, and really, really loved it, and had to take a hiatus for a few years because I was in musical theater school, and it was a very intensive program. And so with that, I just didn't have time to do anything, and that's when about 5e came out, and then by 2017, I graduated, and I got really into starting to GM one-shots and stuff, and more I caught the bug, and then I started running a campaign, and then the pandemic hit. And so I, at that point, started GMing quite a bit, and really, really loving it, and so that's my love for TTRPGs, getting into this space. I started streaming because I was a theater performer in Toronto, Canada, and all the theaters were closed. Our performance space, our community hubs, we couldn't go because of the lockdowns. And in Toronto, Canada, or in Canada in general, we had very, very long lockdowns, especially people who lived in the cities, and so it was rough. But I started streaming on Twitch, mostly just like gaming and stuff, and then I started doing one-shots with friends. Before I knew what the word AP was, this was like early 2020, I watched a lot of AP stuff myself. I watched all of Campaign 2 of Critical Role, Campaign 1, and as a performer, as an actor, as a voice actor, and, joke of all trades a little bit is what I call myself, seeing that and being like, oh my God, I can tell stories through this medium. And some of the things that I don't love as much about the theater industry, namely one, the industry, it's hard to find a job. There's a lot more actors, and it's very predatory. A lot of, and I realized there's something about how actors in the theater space are, their worth is not, they're not treated to their worth, and so they work tirelessly, and it was really not great for the mental health, and a lot of my friends as well. It was something that I realized the culture of it was baked into us since theater school, and a lot of opinions on theater school, but we'll get there. And all this too, I know it sounds like I'm rambling, to get to the part where when I started doing streamed games, it's when I started to really feel good about myself as a GM and feel like, oh, I think I know stuff about this, right? And doing more of it, and over time, just meeting more people, and falling into the TTRPG space itself. I stopped doing gaming streaming because all I wanted to do was talk about TTRPGs. I would, in a 5-hour gaming stream, I would pause for an hour and a half. We would just talk about D&D, right? With my community, my chat. And then I started just doing like world building and talking and chatting streams. At first being like, I don't know if anyone's going to watch this. And then I found, the community of streamers who are very few people who do this, like Mendari, who is amazing and has inspired me a lot in the kind of venue of those things, to be like, oh yeah, people, actually want to sit around and talk about stuff. And I just couldn't look back, right? All that to that's what brought me into the space, and getting to go to conventions too. Over the past year and a half, I've gotten to meet a lot of folk in person and actually start forging bonds with people, and it's just been kind of great. Yeah.
I could never not sing Mindari's praises. Yeah. I adore Mindari. I honestly stumbled upon her, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to stay here for a little bit. Yeah. Learn some things. The same with your stream. I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but I did. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to stay here. I'm going to learn some things. Why not?
It may have been an AP at some point. It may have been a raid in.
Probably.
I don't get many raids because of the time frame of when I stream, right? I stream after the afternoon UK crowd is done, and before, the afternoon Eastern crowd is done. And I've cut my streams shorter recently because doing tabletop talks for hours on end is a lot more mentally draining than, having something to bounce off of. And I realized it yesterday. I was doing a stream where I was just going over the Monster Manual 2024, and just having that to kind of bounce off of, I could have kept going. But I had a hard out because I had a coaching client. But it's about the bandwidth of it, right? And all that jazz. Yeah.
Speaking of your coachings, because we did talk about it at the beginning, how did you get into doing coachings? Because you're not just doing GM coachings, you're doing, AP related production. I've bugged you about content creation. Hey, y'all, if you want someone to blame for me pushing really hard for this podcast, you can blame Matt and a lot of other people in the space who are like, yeah, do that, dumbass.
Yeah.
So,
look, it's to me, it was an interesting thing to talk about content creation as someone who thinks that, like, I'm really bad at content. I'm not a content creator. I'm an artist and a GM and a storyteller. And if anything, I will call myself a coach because I care about the craft of the thing. And I think I'm a lot, I just prefer, working and talking about the craft. But unfortunately, to do the craft, you got to also content create. And there's so many venues that I even told you about it that I'm like, here's, I think, something that you need to do that I suck at doing, that I can't do, that I need to learn myself to do, right? Like short form content and finding a wider audience. Twitch is not a tremendous place to find an audience, especially in the category that I'm at. And in anything content creation, it's all chaos and it's about getting lucky. And finding your niche, finding what people respond to, finding what algorithms respond to, if anything, too, but also finding what those things respond to in a way that you can keep doing it without burning out is a big thing. But yeah, the question of how did I get into coaching? Oh my God, I don't even remember. I don't even know how it started. I think it started with kind of just putting it out there, and people started wanting to do the thing, and I realized people were asking me like, hey, can we work on this? Because to me, at first I was setting out to do like world building coaching and like GM session prep coaching and stuff like that. And some of my clients that are my community members they're like, I'm not a GM, can we do voice stuff? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I had a coaching with someone that it was really fun and interesting. We were working on a French accent for them. I speak French, so do they. We're both French Canadian, and so we were navigating, speaking and like working on an accent that we both speak the language of in English. And it was very fun and a very unique experience for me. All that to say that I have a lot of different unique experiences with my coaching, right? And like if I really didn't, if someone wanted me to coach them on something, I'm like, I don't think I'm a good person for this. I wouldn't. That's why when we talked about content stuff, I wanted to be like, forewarning, I'm not a master at this thing. I just have experiences as someone who has done the Twitch side of things, and you know. And I thought our coaching was great. I thought like I was like, oh, okay, I can see the thing, and you know, at the end of the day, you just got to make stuff, throw spaghetti at a wall, see what sticks, and if you enjoy it, all the better, right? It's all about expectation, right? What do you expect to come out of this? If you're throwing an expectation that you know it's a gamble, that it might not meet that expectation. It's more about figuring out, okay, what is my relationship to the expectation of what I want from this? And is me putting myself out there going to be harmful for my mental health, right? Yeah. Anyway, I digress.
I think that's the problem with content creation is like you want to do so many things. And it's the same with, I think, in the AP space and also just TTRPGs in general. You want to do so many things. You're like, I have this and this I want to do. And I mean, we talked about it in our coaching. I was like, I have this thing I want to do. I want to do this podcast. I want to, you know, build this world and finish this. I just don't have time or the mental capacity. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, that whenever it comes to doing this, just
it's creative bandwidth,
being in
right?
the space, you can get burnt out really fast if you're on a lot of stuff
Yep.
on top of your own things.
It's creative bandwidth, and it's trying to understand, like, okay, what am I trying to get out of this thing, right? Like, if you never know, like, and this is as someone who we talked about content stuff, right? Recording all these podcasts, putting them out there. If you realize, oh, the views are not what I expected them to be, and then that leads to like being disheartened, that is like setting yourself up from the beginning for failure. You know what I mean? Where it's like, hey, the goal is to enjoy the process, learn something about content, learn something about recording, learn something about production, connect with some folk. Then no matter what, you win, right? It's all about that part. And I say this about like most people that are content creators, especially in the TTRPG space, who have bigger audiences who didn't before, scored big on like TikTok when it was new, right? And scored big on algorithms and stuff. And this is not to like take away credit from them as performers, right? But like it's looking at what actually got you your audience. And there's no like judgment in terms of there's a good way, there's a bad way, and all that. It's all about, it's kind of chaos in a way, right? Where a lot of those folk didn't set out probably from what I've experienced talking to people that, oh, I'm gonna start doing this thing and it's gonna pan out the way that I expect it, right? It's a snowball effect happened. They're like, oh wow, and they kind of kept doing the thing and like. You know what I mean? They didn't really set out with that expectation from the get-go. So it's all about what expectation you have of the thing, right? And reassessing, and also just kind of being kind to yourself. Like, you got to go like, there's always a little devil on my shoulder that says, make more short-form content. But I'm like, I know that I can't just sit down and, let's say, regurgitate a style that someone else does if I don't feel the creative impulse to do the thing, right? If I don't feel like, oh, this is something that I could do, and then also do more of it, because you have to keep trying and seeing if it's algorithmically friendly before continuing or moving on to something else, right? You've got to put in not just I'm going to put one video out there and stop doing it if it doesn't do well, you know what I mean? And then move on to something else. And so everything is time consuming, right? And especially when my favorite thing to do ever is GM and storytell, I can't output nearly as much anything as anyone because of everything involved with GMing, everything involved with getting an AP group together, even just stream a game, right? Production is huge. Production is absolutely huge. Someone to talk to about that is the wonderful Gnome Ann. Gnome and I have done co-productions together where they focused on more of the GMing side of things, and I came in as a producer and doing all that. And because we've done both, and we realize it is a lot, right? And just GMing in general is a lot. But a lot of what I do with my coachings with or what I say to my community about GMing and newer GMs and stuff is, you are allowed. You need to set boundaries. You need to understand that what you are doing is laborious, and that you are allowed to have your needs met, right? There's a reason why there is what's the word in English in pénurie? There is a massive lack of GMs, especially for D&D 5e, right? It's not super friendly for newer GMs. Just in general, the resources aren't there. It's one of those things where, for me, it's great. It's a great system. I'm an improviser, right? But for newer folk, they might have a bit of a harder time being like, well, how do I actually do this thing? That's why a lot of new GMs are emulating AP, because you get to actually watch the thing in action, right? All that to say, it all depends on what your expectation is, right? I know I can't output the same amount of like just stuff out there as some folk, and also I think in a space of like transition as a creative, right? I just moved countries, and that was a lot, and I keep trying to remind myself that it's okay that I'm not outputting in the way that I want to as I find my bearings and I wear many, many hats, right? Because I'm not just doing AP stuff and GM stuff. I also work and do a lot of things, with my wife and the content that we do for her and stuff, right? A lot of photography and video editing and stuff like that, which is labor in itself.
Yeah, as a one-woman production team and editor and everything like that, I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
Speaking of GMing, GMs stepping into the space, not even just like new GMs stepping into the space, do you have any advice for GMs who are like, I kind of want to do an AP? What
My best
do you have
advice
any
is
advice
figure
on
out your
that?
expectation of, figure out what you want, why you want it. This is something, okay, the next thing I'm going to say, like, if people watch this and
Go.
disagree with me, that's fine.
Hot take. Let's
It's not
go.
a hot take. I don't do hot takes. I think the concept of a hot take is more about engagement than being earnest, and the validation of wanting to be right about something. And I think this is something that is universal. Figure out why you want to do the thing you want to do, right? Why do you want to do an AP? It's the same reason. It's like, why do you want to be a theater performer, right? I look back and I'm like, when I was a kid, when I wanted to do theater, like most people that I think get into theater, they do it because they do it once. Either it's really, really fun, or they do something and they're validated for it, right? Like I was, And so figuring out why you want to do the thing is very important, because you are turning a hobby into a bit of a job. And what I mean by job, I mean there's added labor to it, not in terms of like you are turning it into a job that it has the expectation of growth and stuff like that, right? Figure out why you want to do it in the first place. A lot of people are doing it. A lot of people, more people over time started getting better cameras, better microphones and stuff. And like, there's a barrier of entry to be able to do these things, right? Chances are, if you have a 40-hour-a-week job, it's going to be a lot harder to be able to put in this extra time and energy into this stuff, right? And I see some people who do it, and to them, hats off. Good for you guys. Like, great, like, hell yeah. But figuring out why you want to do it, I think, is very important. Do you actually want to build production? Do you actually want to gain an audience? If that's something, then don't be disappointed if it doesn't like pan out the way that you're like, this is what my expectation was, without understanding the space, understanding what you're putting out there as a creative, and understanding like, just in general, like, is the thing that we're doing, is it good? Also, it's mostly marketing. A lot of APs that see traction today, they do it because, once again, they hit it big on other places, other platforms. Not a lot of people are going to come in through the D&D category. Yes, over time, especially if you're like, if you're the APs that have been running for years and you're constantly there on that slot, and people can come in and they can start feeling that regular, like just the regularity of that schedule and vibe with that community and stuff, then absolutely yes, but it takes time. Especially if you are in AP and you do not have a predisposed audience. If you're someone that has a huge other platform somewhere, then my advice is different. It's, learn the tech, figure out the medium, and figure out what you want to do. Are you as a personality streaming your game as, here's me as a personality, or are you trying to be a performer and you're trying to use the medium of TTRPGs for storytelling? If it's that, then hone the craft. Get better at improv. Do all those things. Like, you know what I mean? Make something that's worthwhile for people to watch. That's all. It all depends on what you want to do, right? I think a lot of people have opinions on people stepping into the space and wanting to do AP, and I think it's fine, but those opinions, I think, often are lacking just the thought of people need to understand what their expectation is, and everybody has different expectations, right?
I love that. That I yeah, I think, and that's also, I think, a lot with content creation, and people don't realize that AP is content creation in a way. Like
AP can be
it's
anything. I think that's the thing is
true.
everybody has a subjective view on what AP is and actual play performance is and what is good and what is bad, right? But at the end of the day, all it is you're taking your game, you're streaming it out for people to possibly see or not, right? So if your
Yeah.
expectation is I'm putting this out on Twitch because I want my uncle to watch and hang out and do the thing and just have a few of our friends check out our games, right? That's fine. It's all about expectation, and it's all about why are we doing this thing, straight up, because then it doesn't become this dissonant thing of, oh no, we want to do this thing, we want to grow, but you're not, because you're not understanding these zillion fucking things that contribute to that, right?
Yeah.
And it helps as someone who is a content creator who cares about the stuff, who I wasn't the best at it myself, and I'm going to say that. I think there's something to me where I have to be kind with myself in understanding, well, there are variables involved, right? But also, then figure out, okay, what do I need to work on now? What do I need to get better at, right? And kind of sort of always balance that. Because knowing more about your expectations, what you want, help you not feel guilt about not doing the thing that you think might be the thing. And also just being more realistic with yourself. It's a form of self-therapy, but that's what everything is in the arts and communication, right? Understanding why we want to do the arts, professionally in the first place, right? I think it's that. It's important, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you and No Man went kind of halvesies whenever it came to a couple of APs. Why did you
Co-pro.
decide to? Huh?
Yeah, co-production. Like we were
Yeah,
both
co-productions. So, what made y'all decide like Gnome's gonna take this side and you're gonna take the production side? Like,
Gnome asked me like, hey, I want to do a thing. Do you want to produce it? Because they're like, producing is an entire fucking job in itself. Do you want to do that? I'm like, yeah. It was that. It was me asked to do production because I have done production, right? And I'm still learning about production. I'm still learning about production. There's so many things that like are out of my hand in terms of like tech and hardware. And if it was up to me, I'd have I just got a new PC recently, but I'd have some that's a bit more of a beast where I think eventually I might want to do a multi-PC setup where I have just the stream running on one thing. Stronger, more secure internet, little things. I was recording. I do the production and recording and all the tech and stuff for Jill's series, Thoughts and Players. And so there were some moments where I was seeing like we use Video Ninja, Riverside that we're on now. It looks really awesome, but I have some questions I'll ask you after about this. But it was more expensive in terms of that production cost stuff. So in the future, once I am back up to the point after moving countries where I can have a much higher budget on what we use for our AP stuff, then I'll invest in more things. But you always learn about something. You learn something new about, the sound here was this, or why is that person's camera dipping out? Is it their internet? Is it is it my CPU is struggling with all these different browser sources and like all these different things, and so. You always learn something new, but essentially all that to say, I am still a student when it comes to the production side of things, but it is a lot of work, and that's the thing, right? When I do one-shots on my channel, there's a reason why I put up, like, depending on the style of game and what I want to come out of the game, right? Some games, I just want to tell a really, really good story and really focus on that. Some games, I have a little bit of redeems that help influence the game because it is very time-consuming. Running D&D is very time-consuming, right? It hit the point where it's like, well, I can't just run games for fun anymore, as a professional game master, because it's like I noticed for a while, I was like, I'm not even playing video games because I just don't have like the energy and downtime. And so it all depends, right? And I think something that is advice, I'd say, for, production stuff is figure out what your production is, what you want, set expectations, communicate well with people around you, and with the people that you have coming into your games, and set the expectation of what you need from them, right? And so if they go like, oh, that's probably a bit too much for me in terms of commitment, at least you both know, right? But yeah, I think I just tangented a bunch around that. But the question is because Noma's like, I want to do more games, I want to narrative, I want to storytell, I want to do stuff with cool people, but they're like, man, the production side of things, like, it's just, they didn't have the bandwidth for both, and they work a full-time job on top of doing everything they do, right? It's a lot, you know.
It is a lot. It's a lot just in general, even whenever you're just like, oh yeah, I'm not even going to pay attention to chat. We're just doing like the live stream and everything like that. And just on top, I mean, as a GM, you are wrangling cats. Let's be real. You're wrangling cats while trying to tell a story, but then add a recording aspect to it. You're like, oh, I'm wrangling cats on top of going through a fire hoop.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And it's part of what, like, you know, with the games that I run, I put more time into production than I do into the actual game prep, right? But that's something that I feel very comfortable improvising, especially improvising with you know, D&D 5e, just as a mechanic system, right? And it lets me adapt to the player choices a lot more, right? And I have a sort of style, a way that I do things where it's always a little sandboxy, to the sense where I am creating the scene of what is happening, and like the tension of what's happening kind of in the game, even in a one shot, and delivering information that allows them to go like, oh, so this is happening, and then allows them to kind of choose. And that's also why I stopped using like battle maps and started doing more theater of the mind stuff, because in terms of production time, having battle maps means I have to design my games a little bit more carefully to kind of seed in the things that I know that it's going to go towards a general certain direction without putting the game on rails. But with, you know, with something like a theater of the mind game, I didn't have to do that as much, right? And also it involved less like programming of a VTT and stuff like that. But over time, I want to start doing stuff with VTTs again. I want to put more time into those productions. I love using Foundry VTT, and I want to work with them, and, you know, doing more of that stuff. But in due time, it's a lot, right? And also being the person who is running the stream and tech while GMing, that's also a lot, right? For Jill, who just started GMing, and I know you're going to have one of these with Jill, because we both, looking at our busy schedule, I was like, hey, I'm going to do this during your stream time. And she's like, oh, yeah, I have mine scheduled during your stream time next week. I was like, perfect, right? It's only a time sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, she's a newer GM, and I was like, okay. And she's a newer GM, and she's crazy and decides I'm only going to GM my first games on stream. Because that's also the part of the thing of having time and bandwidth. So, you know, often as content creators, you got to turn the thing into content. And I was like, cool, you're not doing this while running tech, because that's going to be a lot, right? And a lot of moving pieces and overstimulating and stuff. And so kind of taking that element out, you know, makes it a bit easier, but still, it's still a lot, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Running my first campaign on stream, probably not the smartest idea, but, you know, it's whatever. I'm a content creator.
Is that what you
Again. Yeah. My first campaign, the one that you helped me with the finale of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was, yeah. I was just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
I think
God.
thing that made me the best at AP GMing is having a lot of experience GMing outside the table. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing is just spending a lot of time getting into the groove. Also, like, every now and then, like, getting into doing more in-person games. It's like taking the fucking weights off for me, right? I stand a lot more. You know, I'm a little bit more kind of engaged. It's just so fun. There's a few things there's some quality of life improvements for me in front of my screens, having my notes, having easy access to searching for, let's say, NPC names. You know, names are usually my biggest issue with my short-term memory as ADHD. But it's just always better. Being able to look someone in the eye when you're role-playing is chef's fucking kiss. And that's why, you know, the goal one day is for, you know, Jill and I to have our own little studio to do AP stuff, but also to do, you know, other types of content and stuff. We don't know what this this sort of circle is going to look like in a few years, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do in-person games. I was able to run in-person games at Gen Con. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother beast on top of itself. Yeah. But like, if I was able to do like an in-person long-term campaign, I'd probably be super happy about it. But that's also, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe a thing that will happen. Who knows?
Time, you know. It's,
time. Time. That's another
added little
beast.
Like, you know, where it's kind of easier sometimes to be like, oh, here's a thing in my evening that I just need to sit down to my computer for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned that you have a degree in musical theater.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. what musical would you want to be turned into a TTRPG, whether you do it yourself or into an AP?
What musical? Like taking? I'm so.
Like,
This is a tough question, right?
and it could be anything. It could be
Yeah.
anything from the past. It could be.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even include opera. I know a lot of people would be like, opera's not musical theater. I mean, technically.
Well, that's where musical theater came from, opera.
Yeah, technically it is.
So this question's tough, and it's a very me thing to be like, answer your question by asking 8 more questions. I'm very, and just be overly like heady about the concept of this, blah 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 blah. Probably
Yes.
why I'm not a successful content creator, because I just let's dissect this thing further, and not like
It's okay.
That's why I hate the concept of a hot take of a very specific, subjective thing like this without looking at the gray and context of things, right? So I am, being someone with a background in musical theater, when a musical adaptation is done poorly, it pisses me off. Taking a musical, turning it into a movie, when I'm like, the medium does not transfer very well, it's just an IP cash grab type situation. Is like, it's very important to choose the right thing. Now, my next question for that, before I can answer this question because I'm horrible, is are we taking the setting and generalized story as inspiration for a TTRPG sort of campaign? Or like, are we taking the characters and that's sort of the party? Because that's tough. Taking what kind of TTRPG setting, game, whatever makes the best musical, that's a different question.
That is a different question. I feel like it would be a very rules light setting, or rules light TTRPG.
It's got to be Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
I mean,
Yeah,
Thirsty Sword Lesbians would be perfect. I think anything powered by the apocalypse, or I would say like Kids on Brooms, Kids on Bikes would probably work.
It's about vibe and tone, and like just general thing for that. Like, you can make a musical that's D&D very easily. That's the thing. I think you can make a musical that's inspired and based off of D&D and D&D archetypes, right? Your characters are, based off of certain D&D archetypes, the same way that the D&D movie is based off of certain character archetypes. I've actually considered, I've always thought about like, oh, what if I wrote a musical like that? I'm not a composer. I am a musician. I'm a singer. I'm an intermediate guitar player at best, and I'm genuinely not a composer. So I was like, yep, that's not something I can do. Don't try to do the thing that you're like, I'm not at the place where I can just do this work, But with ADHD, we love the idea and the concept of something, especially when it's novel. I think a musical that would be fun in a sort of TTRPG setting. I'm trying to think of my favorite musicals. It's tough, right? Because a lot of musicals, I like the ones that have good world building. Like Urinetown has its own really interesting world building. So I think Urinetown in a like post-apocalyptic, I don't know, maybe like cyberpunk,
Like a Fallout or cyberpunk.
Yeah, that could be really fun. It's like take the Fallout setting but make it goofy. I think that could be cool. That's my answer.
You're in town and Fallout. I mean,
Town
there
and
is a
Fallout.
Fallout
Yeah.
TTRPG, so yeah,
There you go.
I love
That's
it. I'm waiting. We're all waiting. Whoever listens to this and is willing to take the reins. Now the thing is I, as a person who can't sing, which is why I will never play a bard in an AP unless it's like a drag queen.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing. Like, I could play a drag queen on camera all day long, and I have done it. But I cannot sing. I can act. Act.
The proficiency in the musical instrument is, for a bard in 5e, doesn't matter. Like, you don't get anything from the actual instrument, right? If you are a bard, some of the instruments and are magic items that have abilities and spells and stuff, they're specifically bard items, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, if you need that musical proficiency to do the thing, that's fine. But regardless, you need to be a bard to be able to use the thing anyways. So proficiency in a musical instrument tends to be mostly flavor, right? Like proficiency in a lot of tools and things like that, right? It is and there's some parts of TTRPGs that are at the discretion of the GM and the relationship that is like storytelling based, and then things that are like, oh, this is storytelling based, but it is rooted in mechanics, and you don't have to worry about the music, the singing part. If anything, the fun part, I think, is finding your own creative way to do the class and things. part of the things that I do on my Patreon is I do group coachings, and when talking about like the types of coachings that I do, the group coachings right now, the people that I have in that, one of them's not a GM, and so I was like, okay, this is trying to do something that's going to be creatively inspiring for these folk that they know what the vibe is, and so one of the coachings we do is reflavoring classes and subclasses, right? It's about taking something and trying to stretch the imagination based on this is the subclass ability, these are the types of spells you have, and rewriting the flavor to be something a lot more like very unique as an exercise. And so I was literally thinking, I'm like, hey, what if, and I might do this in short form if I have the guts to one day. You take this song. This song is your spirits bard. If you sing like a more like deathly emo type of song, and take this song, it's Sin and Zion, let's say. This is your charm bard. It's all about being like, how do you get inspiration narratively from the class, the thing in front of you, and the mechanics there, and how do you flavor it to be something else? You could be a poet as a bard. You can be literally anything you want. You don't need to necessarily be a singer. I think people slot things in by default by being like, oh, this is what my reference is to this thing, right? Oh, it's Scanlan Shorthalt on Critical Role who sings all his things because Sam Riegel is a singer, right? And people think of it that way, but what's fun about these games is you can be creative in any way, shape, or form. The whole fun about spending hours in character creation is being like, who is this person, I changed my mind about the musical. It is Shrek. Shrek the musical.
Shrek the musical, but what TTRPG?
Dungeons and Dragons.
In Dungeons and Dragons?
There's a song in that musical called Who I'd Be, and it's about like, if I was a hero and stuff, and Shrek being like, I'm not those things, And to me, the Who I'd Be is the anthem for every adventurer before they become an adventurer. Right? To me, it is the most D&D song in the world. Go check it out after. Pause this video, go listen to Who I'd Be from Shrek the Musical, and don't fall down a YouTube rabbit hole. Come back afterwards. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, good to know. Yeah, no, that sounds, like who am I? The aspiration of like adventuring. Yeah. Oh.
It's cute, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say that you can reflavor anything, right? As long as like you talk to your GM and y'all are both on the same page, right? As the person who has to like imagine everything around and be like, yeah, sure, it's easy to do that, and it's all a creative exercise, and it's fun. And I think these games being creatively stimulating are what make it fun,
So you mentioned your Patreon, which you should all go check out Matt's Patreon.
If there's something there for you.
Yeah,
a lot of it is like just there's general support tiers. There's but a lot of it is my time, right? As someone who is a smaller content creator, to survive and monetize, I put myself out there as a coach and a professional game master and all that. And I actually genuinely really love doing the coachings. They're a lot of fun.
But I remember, I believe you said it on stream that you're about to add either to a tier or something like that, that your games are going to turn into APs soon. Your Patreon.
So I had a few people ask because I was like considering opening a second game, and some people asking because they're like, oh, what if your second game as part of your monthly patron thing is a streamed game? And I was like, okay, if that's something people are interested in, I could absolutely do. Obviously, there's a bit more involved with that in terms of production, but if that's something that is a draw for folk, right? But I'm gonna consider that. I need to see what the demand of that looks like, because I can't just put all this work into something and, that's part of the learning process of content, putting a lot of work into something and realizing, oh, wow, there's not the demand in that. So I need to be I have to budget my energy and time so I don't get EP sleepy and burnt out. But seeing if there is a demand for that, and if not, and also figuring out, is that something that I can commit to monthly? Jill and I travel a decent amount for work. We have a decent amount of events and things, and so figuring that out, being like, hey, for now it's do the next several months look good, and then from then, if I ever have to reschedule something, the rescheduling would be done 2 months in advance, right? So giving people the idea of what to know by expectation.
The next question that I have is, what is your favorite game to be part of, like TTRPG wise?
Like as a player?
Yeah, as a player. Because we've been talking about you as the GM and
Yeah.
producer, but you are also a player in APs as well.
Very rarely. And this is something that like I was literally just doing an interview on Classic Sam and YGM's channel, people always assume A, I'm a forever GM, and B, I'm always too busy. People assume that about friend AJ as well, who runs Castleton, and I always say like, oh, we got each other's backs because we run games for each other and all that. Honestly, I've really enjoyed Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. Thirsty Sword Lesbians was really, really, really fun. I got to do a decent amount of that. I do like playing D&D as a player. I have at this moment yet to play VTM as a player, and I really want to. I have plans with a creator friend, but it's just about getting the strings together, timing wise and scheduling wise. But it really depends and to me, it's more about the table and the storyteller and just the creative vibe of the group than it is about the system itself, right? I think especially as a player, I like wanting to try something new because it helps me kind of get a vibe of the game instead of learning it from a book to then storytell it for the first time. I think just getting a vibe from the player's seat helps you understand a little bit before diving into GMing for the first time. I was a storyteller for my first time doing Vampire the Masquerade, and I was like, man, I want to sit at a table with an experienced storyteller, just get the vibe of the structure of it and how it relates mechanically, and then, go from there as a storyteller. But yeah, honestly, for me, it's more about how awesome is the group in terms of chemistry at the table. Yeah.
I love that. As somebody who plays VTM on camera, I love it so much. I've been able to be an ST, but not on camera, and I'm kind of glad because I'm just like, I'd rather just play this game. I'd rather just people just see, yeah, because it's fun. And also, I think again, yeah, it is vibes. Like, one is the story compelling. Two, is it? I'm also a person that's like, I just want to play a game to get to know how to play the game.
Yeah.
I'm one of those like, I'll fumble through it. I don't mind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because
Right?
I think that's the best way to
player,
learn.
like as a storyteller, as a GM, I'm like, I need to know the mechanics well enough to feel comfortable doing the thing and, kicking ass at it. As a player, I'm happy to stumble through things and ask questions and learn that way. And, but also show up to the table ready to play, ready to, bring in energy and stuff, right? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What system do you want to do, like, be on your channel next?
Oh my god. A few. So many. I'm literally
top three.
System. Mm-hmm. System, I guess, eliminates a bunch of them, but I'm going to say just more Powered by the Apocalypse games. They're easy to learn. They're fun. Each one of them has such a unique vibe. So definitely that. I think after watching some fun AP stuff, the Kids on Whatever systems, like Kids on Bikes, Kids on Brooms, etc., those look really fun too. And on my channel, Daggerheart. I want to see what Critical Role has been cooking up, and when I have time, kind of absorbing what they've been doing. But yeah, I think those are three of the ones right now that I can think of. That, and honestly, I kind of want to do more like one-on-one RPGs, either with a guest or with Jill and all that. I think they'd be really fun. I have a few of them. There's one here that I've been wanting to maybe do for a while that is a bartending, like a bar crawl type RPG, and I used to be a bartender. I just did a fantasy cocktail stream, and so I think the combination of like crafting cocktails and doing that would be something fun, but that's probably sometime in the future. It's time consuming and all that jazz, right? So we'll see.
I just thought of a D&D subclass.
What?
The bartender, the mixologist, bard, or artificer.
So it's kind of like an alchemist, except you have to have it's wisdom based because you have to have high insight because you're everybody's therapist,
Also, you have to make sure you know how to cut people off.
Yep.
Or don't overserve them.
It's high insight for sure,
Yeah.
right? It's the artificer, except less. You could have the mixologist version that is more of an alchemist that is int based. You can have the bartender version that's more like vibes based.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dive bar.
Oh yeah.
CDN.
Yeah.
Underground bunker type. Ooh.
Yep.
Good to know. Well. with all that being said,
Well, that being said,
plug your shit, King.
oh my god, plug my shit. I don't know when this is airing. Is it airing in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
You are. I will edit this out. Hold on. I. Damn it.
You're all good.
You put me on the spot.
Or just the general vibes. You're all good. All right.
No, because I already have you down for the 17th of March. So.
Brilliant. All right, then I'm just gonna plug general stuff. So check me out, twitch.tv/theplaymat. I do stream Mondays and Wednesdays as of now at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. A little thing I do called Tabletop Talks. We do anything tabletop, which is a world-building homebrew, chatting, game theory, hanging out, vibing, joking around, having a good time. And yeah, more AP stuff to come. At this point, hopefully something of a more substantially longer campaign on my channel. Otherwise, I do a lot of one-shots for fun and a lot of fun incentive streams. You can check out my Patreon as well. You can find that on my Twitch channel, where if you like the things I say, come join some of the tiers for coachings and stuff like that. Otherwise, just hoping to keep being in the space and doing good stuff and having some fun.
I will see you in chat because I'm in your chat whenever you're live. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode of After the Table, a TTRPG podcast. I've been your host, Shelly Von Miller. And you can find me everywhere on the internet at Shelly Von Miller. All the links down below, to include Patreon and Fourth Wall memberships, where you can get early access to episodes as well as other content at tiers starting at $7 a month. Come support the content if you love it so much.
And smash that subscribe button.
Smash that subscribe button.
Did I content create? Did I do it?
Yes, exactly.
Love it.
I love you guys very much, and I will see you on the internet. Goodbye!